Inoki had finally figured out how to save his political career, and it, perhaps strangely, involved holding the greatest pro-wrestling event the world had ever seen. This in itself would be controversial, but NJPW was a Japanese company, and WCW was an American company, two countries considered the greatest of enemies to North Korea. Despite this, Inoki was willing, hoping the publicity and goodwill gleaned from the so-called World Peace event, as he dubbed it, would boost his chances at re-election. Now, of course, all this really amounts to nothing if North Korea didn't actually agree to hold the event, and for such an isolationist country intent on keeping outsiders away, this just wasn't going to happen, barring, of course, some unprecedented event that would change the course of North Korea. Which it did. The supreme leader had died, and his son Kim Jong-il was now ruler, which meant he needed to make a statement. He needed to showcase his newfound power and influence to the world and to his own people. He needed to prove his worth and establish a cult of personality he felt was vital for political control, something he learned from Dad. And, odd as it may seem to us, a grand pro-wrestling event with its simplistic portrayals of good and evil apparently served that purpose. North Korea had always tended towards these types of old-fashioned Stalinist spectacles in showcasing their might. And so, he was on board. Thus the pieces were now in place. Inoki, Bischoff, and Kim were all in. But they needed a main event to headline the show, one that would generate a great deal of buzz. And it only made sense that Inoki himself be involved, given his superstar status, which he agreed to. Being semi-retired from the sport by that point, and being an active high-profile politician, made it unexpected to some. Inoki had always taken a, shall we say, hands-on approach in diplomatic affairs. And controversies aside, his actions have often stemmed from a genuine interest in promoting world peace, to the point of putting himself in some real danger. Now, the question was though, who was he going to face in the main event? His opponent also had to be someone big, and preferably American. And so Eric Bischoff went and asked his biggest star in WCW to join him in Pyongyang. The most famous wrestler of all time, Hulk Hogan, who said no. But who did agree to join him was the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. Also one of the all-time greats. Unlike Hogan, Party Boy Flair was always up for an adventure and was excited to take the risk. And a risk it was, as once inside the Hermit Kingdom, no one would be able to guarantee their safety. Now, at this point, the powers that be wanted even more prestige added to the event, so they called upon a name that even non-wrestling fans would have heard of. Astonishingly, Bischoff was able to convince Muhammad Ali the Greatest to join them on the ride. Many months later, in Pyongyang, this motley crew of high-profile American and Japanese wrestlers and performers touched down in a special military plane sent by the North Korean government. They were warned in advance the plane would be filled with microphones, which meant they had to refrain from saying anything even remotely negative about the country. Upon landing, each person had their passports taken and was immediately assigned a handler by North Korea's intelligence agency to follow them around 24/7. This meant they weren't allowed to go anywhere except for on carefully curated tours of the country, crafted specifically for them. On these tours, they had to go to monuments and memorials where they were told by their handlers that the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki never happened, and that North Korea won World War II. Many times, they had to pay their respects to the great heroes of North Korea's past, including, of course, the recently deceased Supreme Leader. All in all, they were simply the best, and if anyone told them otherwise, there would be severe consequences. One of the wrestlers, Big Scott Norton, found this out the hard way. One night in his hotel room, he was on the phone with his wife, who was in the US. They were arguing, as she was accusing him of partying recklessly, having a blast with the guys over in Asia. Norton tried to explain that she was wrong, that that sort of thing just wasn't possible in North Korea. But she didn't believe him. Out of frustration, he yelled, "You don't understand what kind of shit we're in." Which is when the phone went dead. The door suddenly opened, and North Korean military personnel came in and forced him out. They sat him down in an interrogation room and informed him that he can't talk about their country like that. Indeed, they had heard everything. The phone was tapped, and the room was bugged. All the hotel rooms were under surveillance. According to his later account, Norton fully expected to be shot right then, right there. But as things were looking dire, someone high up in command walked in, and after some vague threats and a stern warning, he was let go. Perhaps it was because they knew a high-profile diplomatic incident would likely be more detrimental to North Korea. Or They just didn't want to ruin the big event the next day, as Scott Norton was a featured attraction. Either way, come event time, Norton Flair, all the wrestlers were ready to put on a show. Now, there was a huge famine going on, and so the wrestlers really had no idea what sort of crowd to expect. Would they even be able to afford tickets?